Good evening. Welcome back to the Glazov Gang, our second segment of this very special episode. And our guests this evening, Borek, Ari, and Basil. Three fantastic names. What an honor and a privilege it is to have you here. Are you excited?
I am. Oh, I'm so excited.
And Basil, you speak excellent English, right?
I do. I speak English perfectly, and I've gotten over any temptation I've had to speak Canadian.
Okay, did you ever even have a little bit of a Canadian accent?
You know, I didn't. My father wouldn't allow us to speak it in the house.
But what did it sound like? What did it sound like? He or Dad was Canadian?
Yeah, my father was Canadian.
Did he say a and a boot? And
no, my father only spoke English in the house.
Oh, he wasn't Quebecois?
Okay, gentlemen, we have some very serious things to discuss today, but let's do a few in-house matters first. Basil, let us begin with you. You have a book in front of you. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about it?
Yeah, a few years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I could write a book on cold reading for actors for auditions, because he knew that I was coaching and that I'd done a lot of work as an actor, so I wrote a little book. Then that book came out. Then about 5 or 6 years ago, another friend of mine asked me if I had another book in me, and that was this one, Acting and How to Be Good at It. And I wrote letters to a bunch of people I'd worked with, big directors. I sent them copies of the manuscript, and I wanted to know if it was okay with them, that I'd said the things I'd said. And everybody approved except for one, Sidney Pollack. He didn't like something I'd said. He asked me if I would change it, and he wrote the foreword for my book.
Wow. Now,
Acting and How to Be Good at It, with a foreword by Sidney Pollack.
But do you even have to act as an actor, or is acting a little bit about life as well? We have to act through life sometimes, right?
Well, it has to be real. I call it amplified realism is what I call acting. What we're looking at when we see actors work, hopefully we see amplified realism. We see realism, but we see it bigger and clearer and better than it would be in life.
So let's bring this full circle. Are leftists good actors?
They can be. They can be. They're childlike. And children are perfect actors because children express their emotions very well. Mm-hmm. And acting is an emotional exercise. And liberals, Democrats, liberals, live by their feelings.
That's very interesting.
So they make terrific actors, or fairly good actors.
And it's very interesting that you say about childlike because, you know, when you study the left, you see that it's an adolescent fairy tale.
Absolutely.
They live in fairy tales in terms of what they think the world is and what it can be.
Yes.
Ari.
Yes.
Tell our viewers about your Ari David show.
I do a podcast every day of the week on the SideshowNetwork.tv, which is a new podcast channel. And it kind of came about in an interesting way. The channel hosts mostly comedic materials, comedians hosting their podcasts. Different ones like Tommy Chong and Brian Callen and Phil Hendry have their shows on there. But the producer of these different shows contacted me and asked me if I wanted to do a political show. So I do one there, and it's a blend of trying to find the connections between conservative politics and different hooks into culture. Because if you can't change politics without affecting the popular culture, so I try to find connections in those different arenas to communicate conservative ideas to people who aren't exposed to them.
And is it a tragedy, and maybe this is a rhetorical question, that conservatives are really bad at fighting political war?
Well, the worst thing about the real tragedy to me that I've seen is that most conservatives define fighting a culture war by canceling their cable or not participating.
Instead of participating.
Rather than creating good content that is conservative because it embodies some common sense ideal.
Well, Andrew Klavan is big on this, saying that conservatives have to get into the arts rather than, as you say, extricating themselves from
Absolutely.
it. And where can viewers and listeners tap into?
2 places. redavid.us is my website that hosts all the episodes, and SideshowNetwork.tv. has both my show and the others, so you can find my show in both places.
Fantastic. Now, Ari, so you're very smart, but also very funny?
Okay.
Are you?
I will admit to that.
Okay. Are you more?
Guilty as
Yeah.
charged.
Now, is it more funny or smart? Like, what are you? Are you more funny than you are smart?
Well,
or are
it
you smarter
depends.
than you're funny?
It depends on the subject. When I'm
Okay.
talking about Sandy Hook and the massacre of children, there isn't a lot of funny there. You know,
Okay.
if I'm talking about Al Gore, it's hilarious. So, you know,
May,
really
may I
depends.
jump in here?
Absolutely.
I've worked with Ari, and he's very funny.
He's very funny. And also smart.
Yes.
Borek, why don't you tell us a quick story?
Well, okay, let me tell you something. No matter how much the liberals are trying to make a racist out of me, I'm still not a racist and I'll never be a racist. I shook hands with Louis Armstrong. Okay. Anyway, well, let me tell you a little story. This is what happened to me a couple of years ago. I was working for a company in Agoura Hills and I was eating my soup in a break room, you know, and there was a TV on the wall, there was some show on the TV, and there was a group of girls sitting around the table giggling and like cheering at that show. So I turned around, looked at the TV. Later I learned it was a Maury Povich show. I never knew who Maury Povich was. Anyway, the show was about some guy who had children with 5 different women. All of them happened to be black.
That's what Maury Povich is usually about,
Not
those
my fault.
themes. Okay.
And like the surprise in the show was that the guy showed up, you know, and all those 5
Okay.
women were there, whatever. So, okay, so then I turned to those girls around the table who were cheering, you know, and giggling, and I said, yeah, now do you think that he pays on those kids? And the girl said, oh, I don't think so. I said, see? So now we pay because they are on welfare, right? So we feed them. Now, one of those girls jumped up and went just into my face like this. You can't say that! You can't say that! You know, but it's probably what really happens, right? You just said that you don't believe it. But you can't say that! You can't! Just like, well, okay, I let them go. I finished my soup. A few days later.
Just a sec, Ari, were you feeling uncomfortable? He's a little bit scary, but you're okay? That was a good imitation.
In Basil's book, it says a good actor will always react to stimuli. So I was trying to follow his book while not looking
But
scared.
you could be a good
You
actor.
read my book!
Okay, I play theater.
You could be a great actor, but go
I
ahead.
spent 10 years on stage.
Wow, we have Renaissance people
Back
here.
in Czechoslovakia. Anyway,
Okay.
a few days later, I received an email from my boss, who happened to be a black lady, but she was fine. Okay, I have nothing bad to say about her. She was really good and fair team leader. And I was called into the HR office, and I was scolded, and I was given 30 days probation. I didn't know why. So they tell me, do you remember some kind of incident in the break room lately? So, I don't know. Well, you know, something. Oh, what did I do? They wouldn't tell me. Well, you said something. What did I say? Nah, I left the room completely confused, okay, completely flabbergasted. And then it, you know, sank down, and I emailed my team leader, like, what the heck is going on here? Are you trying to portray me as a racist or something? What's wrong? Is welfare illegal, or what's going on? I want a hearing with the big boss, and I want 2 male witnesses with me. Well, I got a hearing with the big boss, no witnesses, but HR, and the big boss trying, you know, sometimes people, you know, you say something and people hear something. What did I say? Well, you know, people hear things. I said, tell me what I did.
So
they
Borek,
weren't able to explain to me what I did.
Borek, how did it end?
And I told them, now, how do you guys dare to judge me if you're not even capable of telling me what I did? So they, you know, they beat around the bush, and then the big boss says, okay. I didn't shake his hand. I said, no, it's not okay. I'm frustrated, and I left.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Borek, and we will continue on that theme as our shows go along, but let me use that as a hook for one of our topics this week. Gentlemen, we have, I guess what they're called, wilding incidents, flash mob gangs. But this is happening. It's just happening in Chicago this week. And what's very, very interesting is that these are black gangs. And this is not just happening in Chicago. Get the book, White Girl Bleed a Lot, by Colin Flaherty. And he's talking about this. That book documents it, that there is a problem of black gang violence throughout America. It's happening in Chicago this week. Gentlemen, the media is running out of how they can describe this. They're saying it's teens blowing off steam or this and that, but they're not using the word. And this is just incredible that our media can't even report the truth of a situation. What do you, and this is in many respects connected to what happened to Borek. Basil, what do you think of political correctness and the leftist ideology that's infected us in this way?
I think it's been very destructive, and I'll tell you one of the reasons. Because they only report a teeny little piece of it. They will talk about the arrests, for instance, and that's all we'll ever hear of it. But what we won't hear about is the fact that there will be no convictions and there will be no sentences. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. If there were convictions and there were sentences, some of this stuff would stop. If these people found out that they'd have to have a responsibility for their behavior. And I think we should do that all across the board. I would like to see that for voter fraud. I would like to see voter fraud a capital crime. Life in prison without possibility of parole for voter fraud. It would stop.
It's so interesting and mind-boggling how the left operates, because there are certain groups that they just believe cannot engage in quote-unquote bad things, and they don't want to get into the causes of it. For instance, slavery of black people in Africa. We've got a huge Arab Islamic slave trade that's continuing to this day, and the left that pretends it's against racism will not touch that topic. Ari, your thoughts on this?
Oh, we have a huge problem with African Americans enslaved in America today. Have you seen college athletics where these kids are put on TV to earn an average of $27 million per university with aggregate TV rights, merchandising, everything else? And what do the kids get paid? Oh, they get an education. But, how good's an education when they take black studies, Hispanic studies, liberal studies, art history, and maybe English, 0.05 or something like that. What you're talking about with this black gang problem, this is not a black gang problem. The black gang problem was in the 1980s. It was with the Crips and the Bloods doing drive-by shootings and dealing crack. Those were black gangs. What you have now is essentially the equivalent of the Aryan nation, but made up of blacks, engaging in essentially a military assault on white civilians and other people, even blacks. Normal people are being assaulted by this. And it's almost like the movie A Clockwork Orange come to life, in which the youth have lost all respect for older people, normal people, nonviolent people, and you have both the government agencies, law enforcement, and the media unwilling to report it. And you talked about, real quick, how the left tries to protect people, but actually they hurt them.
Absolutely.
All of the leftist ideologies that are geared to help specifically blacks, affirmative action, minimum wage, everything else, does the opposite and hurts them. So I'm of the opinion that the real racists are liberals.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the problems, for instance, is they have their narrative. If there's members of the black community that maybe are doing something wrong, it's because white racism drove them to it. But just a second. Could it be, as Larry Elder has documented, and Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell and et cetera, these black intellectuals that have had the courage to come forward and to say, maybe it has something to do with a father missing in the home. And maybe that culture needs to do some reflection on some of its culture and the ingredients of its culture. But the left doesn't want to touch that.
No, it's all caused by Ben Carson.
Yeah, it's all, absolutely.
Right.
But you can say that. But you can say that. Lately I'm becoming so disgusted and frustrated with our mainstream or lamestream media that I'm actually starting comparing them to communist newspaper. Back in Czechoslovakia, this is how we described communist newspaper. Communist newspaper, just like today's mainstream media, consists typically of three parts: the truth, the probable, and a bunch of lies. The truth is the date. The probable is the weather forecast. The rest is a bunch of lies.
And well, absolutely, Borek. But look, it's absolutely great point, and it's incredible. I think the greatest example is Benghazi. The media's silence, in my opinion, is just criminal. We've only got 2 minutes left. Very briefly, please. But Basil, please tell us very briefly, because I want to touch on guns. There's a huge draconian anti-gun law bill now in Connecticut. Tell us about Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Dianne Feinstein is such a grandstander, and she's so disingenuous because she's trying to limit the size of magazines and clips to under 10 rounds. And she continues to cite her experience with this because she was in the San Francisco city government when Mayor Moscone and Harvey Milk were killed. And she doesn't mention the fact that they were killed with a Smith & Wesson 38 caliber Chief revolver that holds 5 bullets. When Moscone was killed, he was killed with 4 shots. And Dan White refilled his revolver and then killed Harvey Milk. But he had to have 10 bullets in his pocket. So if Dianne Feinstein were going to be real about this, she would say, we better limit the size of pockets.
Wow, excellent point. But this is, again, the left. If the facts don't fit into their dreams and their opinions, then too bad for the facts, right? Absolutely. We are out of time, but 15 seconds each, please, on guns. Ari?
It's just a state that the left needs hysteria in order to keep people upset, disassociated. It's classic Alinsky principle where you have a little want mores, get them agitated, then you can control them. The gun hysteria post Sandy Hook and what's going on school campuses is all part of that.
Borek?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Dianne Feinstein does have a gun, doesn't she?
Well, and she carries concealed.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
well, this is
for many years.
Okay, so do I have to say anything more?
All people are equal, but some are more equal than others. Gentlemen, if Obama's going to come for the guns, will they succeed or will they overreach and American people will fight back?
People will fight back.
Fight back, yes.
Not a chance.
In terms of
them getting our guns, never.
Okay, so
Never.
Let's hope that they overreach.
It's because we
will
have
kick
guns;
them.
they can't take them. You know?
Borek, Volarik,
That's the point.
Right.
Borek, Volarik, Ari, David, and Basil Hoffman. What an honor to have you on the Glazov gang. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jamie.
We'll see you next week.